The following program is intended for mature audiences.
Rudy's Revelation.
I don't really care, Margaret. I don't want that person in my country.
This is a conspiracy.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve of
Hey, everyone. Welcome to today's episode. It is January 29th, Wednesday. All right, today we're going to be talking about reformation and whether that's possible in the United States government. Trump is going to attempt to do so, but he is going to depend on his cabinet to help. Also, the retribution of sorts has begun. Pete Hegseth took away former Army General and Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, took away his security detail and removed his security clearance. Also, we're going to talk a little bit about the 500 million U.S. taxpayer dollars used to buy condoms for Palestinians living in Gaza. I'm not really sure what that's all about. I have a clue, and I'm going to share that with you in just a second. So let's get into the headlines for today, Wednesday, January 29th. All right, so we're going to start out with the Associated Press. Trump offering federal workers buyouts with 8 months' pay in effort to shrink government. So he is offering this blanket to federal employees who want to leave and offering them a severance. But this is to cover for the wide swath of government employees he's releasing and firing. He did this during his first term. It was, I think, a little inadvertent, but he failed to fill cabinet posts, and people saw that as an attempt to shrink government. Here, it's very purposeful. He's rooting out all the traitors in the bureaucracy and putting in his own people and changing the tone to set forth reformation, starting with his new press secretary, Caroline Leavitt. What America News is reporting highlights of White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt's first press briefing. I'll just go briefly into the briefing. A couple of things she said is starting today, the seat in front of the room, which is usually occupied by the press secretary's staff, will be called the new media seat. And I guess this is going to be rotating, that they're going to have journalists from the alternative media, blogs, podcasts, etc., sitting in that seat, being able to ask questions. She already started the day with taking questions from alternative media. Breitbart isn't really alternative media, but taking questions from Matt Boyle, who's Breitbart's DC guy. I tend to listen to him on Saturday. So it was nice to hear him be able to ask questions. The article also quotes Caroline Leavitt as saying, the White House believes strongly in the First Amendment. So why our team is working diligently to restore press passes of the 440 journalists whose passes were wrongly revoked by the previous administration. And then she also went on to say that she is going to be speaking the truth, and she expects all the media to do the same. NBC News is reporting what Caroline Leavitt reported, that most New Jersey drones that caused a stir a few months ago were authorized by the FAA. This was not the enemy. New Jersey residents were concerned over the large amount of mysterious drones that flew over their homes, sparking conspiracy theories about the sources. Some believed, because at the same time, there was a Chinese national, arrested for flying a drone over a military base in California. People suspected this was the Chinese. So it was even the Trump Tower bomber, New Year's bomber in Las Vegas, also stated in his supposed manifesto that these were Chinese drones using new propulsion systems. Now, we need to talk a little bit about this, and I don't want to digress too much, but the statement by Caroline Leavitt was also slightly veiled. She said that the FAA approved these drones, which means you have to, if you're flying over a certain altitude, you have to file a flight plan with the FAA, and all people that fly certain size drones that go in certain airspaces need to be licensed as well. But basically the thing she said was that they were approved, and then she inferred or led us to believe that some of them were government drones for experimentation, because then she said others were flown by civilians, hobbyists, etc., or scientists. She painted a broad swath. So it led us to believe that the U.S. government was participating in some of these flights. This is a big story from Reuters. Nonprofits, health groups sue over Trump's freeze on grants and loans. And I need to go over this briefly because the story is very short. And but there's more to the story. First of all, the headline, nonprofits, health groups sue over Trump's freeze on grants and loans. Health groups in here are a red herring. So if you didn't hear my show the other day, NGOs, nonprofit or non-governmental organizations, are predominantly, since Obama, leftist progressive groups, sometimes political, most of the time political, but even though they claim they're not being political. In any case, this is the strength of the progressive movement. People couldn't figure out, even if you vote out Democrat politicians, how does this upswell, either culturally or within the electorate itself, keep forcing Democrat politicians into office, even though their policies usually end up being very unpopular. The reason is the nonprofits, the NGOs. It's the same thing that's driving the immigration waves that are crossing the southern border with illegal aliens. These people are recruited by NGOs in Central America and South America and all sorts of other countries. And then when they get to the Darien Gap or the staging area for the Darien Gap, they're given maps, they're given debit cards, they're assisted by the NGOs on told where to go and to prepare them for their journey. Not only is that happening, but NGOs within the United States, that's why Russia banned them, is they're working, and sometimes illegally, for a political gain. Okay. The story basically just says 3 groups representing nonprofits, public health professionals, and small businesses filed a lawsuit on Tuesday challenging U.S. President Donald Trump's administration's his administration's sweeping directive to temporarily freeze federal loans, grants, and other financial assistance. U.S. governmental aid to different countries, to different organizations, all should be frozen. He's doing the right thing. This is the crucial step in the fiscal reformation of the U.S. government, and that's where Doge comes in, etc. All right, I belabored that a little bit. The Associated Press is reporting Trump order aims to end federal support for gender transitions for those under 19. Now, this is part of the culture war, but what we have to understand about the culture war is that it is driven by NGO groups, nonprofits that are in league with the Democratic Party, with the DNC, and all other leftist progressive groups. So George Soros's Open Society Foundation is actually a nonprofit. So this is one of the majors under the umbrella of what used to be the OFA, which is a quasi-political group that is involved in training activists. And that's how you saw these BLM people come out and seem to be trained in activism. But you have housewives that also maybe wittingly or unwittingly took OFA classes. So Trump is aiming to end gender transitions for children that are federally funded. And this should go without saying. That's why people were all in a hullabaloo about not funding abortions with federal dollars. This is the same cultural issue that the federal government for no reason should be funding whether somebody's in a federal prison or not. No way, shape, or form should the federal government be paying for, anything of the personal nature, personal realm. Whether it's gender transitioning or anything else for that matter. Just the News is reporting Trump administration revokes temporary protected status for Venezuelans in U.S. Now, the reason this was here originally was because Venezuela is a communist dictatorship. So somewhere in the federal government, there is a unwritten rule that political ideology, refugees, or people claiming asylum from certain political ideologies, i.e. socialism, communism, were protected refugee status and were always given asylum. Those laws had changed over time, but Biden gave them temporary protected status. And that goes for other people like Haitians that didn't come from communist countries, but obviously come from non-existent states, failed states, like Haiti. In any case, this is to open the door to deport Venezuelans. You can't deport Venezuelan protected illegal aliens, because most of the Trendaragua prison gang are Venezuelan. So you got to deport those people, but Biden had protected status. See how this doesn't make sense? The Biden administration or Democratic policies overall tend not to work and almost seem to be feeding the opposite result. Washington Times, Pentagon Chief Hegseth yanks General Milley's security detail and clearance. Hegseth orders IG inspection into Milley's actions to see if he should be demoted. So you should check out episode 104 of Tuesdays with Perry. Perry and I discussed this at length because this was news that broke yesterday afternoon, early evening. So Hegseth goes after Milley, rightfully so. He should be demoted, a court-martial that would be, for him calling the Chinese Communist Party and telling them that he was in control during the Trump presidency, and that if Trump ordered an attack on China, he would call them and let them know. That's treason. So certainly all these actions were warranted by Pete Hegseth. Good for Pete for doing it. This is part of the Reformation. Reformation, that is what it is. Reform. It is total gutting, draining the swamp, the U.S. federal government, and reforming with Doge as the watchdog, every bit of it, particularly for fiscal reasons. But also there's certainly some treason going on, traitorous activity, and that has to be rooted out as well. Not to mention what I spoke previously, the progressive fifth generational warfare that's being waged by the communists with the aid of socialists in this country and other countries around the world. The global left. They're Jacobin in nature, but I'm not going to digress too much into what's going on with the left being an actual conspiracy. So Reuters is reporting Trump paralyzes U.S. Labor Board by firing Democrat member. President Donald Trump has fired 2 Democrat officials at the National Labor Relations Board, a major shakeup that will bring hundreds of cases accusing companies of unlawful labor practices to a standstill and paves the way for the Republican control of the agency. Okay, this is why this is important. I used to be a union chair back when I was working in journalism, and the National Labor Relations Board is the arbiter for lawsuits brought by unions against companies or any filing. This is what you do. You don't file a lawsuit. The unions will go to the NLRB and lodge a complaint against corporations. Sometimes it's legitimate. Sometimes they use that as a tactic in contract negotiation. So, but the skew of the NLRB is important because Republicans rule on arbitrations favorably for the companies, and Democrats rule for the unions in most cases. So when I was a union chair and we were going to file with the NLB, we'd always take into account who was in the administration and what the board makeup looked like. So this is a win for corporatists and corporations. The NLRB members were Gwen Wilcox and a lawyer who was set to be removed was General Counsel Jennifer Abruzzi, both appointees of Democratic former President Joe Biden. Wilcox was the first black woman to serve on the agency's 5-member board, said in a statement that she would pursue all legal avenues to challenge her firing. I'm on the fence about this. If these people are hard left activists and non-objective, of course they should be removed. I'm going to err on the side of Trump, but labor boards are important to buttress unions. Excuse me. And so I'm a little torn here, whether it's corrupt or not. This is what I found with unions. Unions are corrupt and unions suck. My unions were 4 shots, 4 masks, for the Democrats, for Hillary Clinton, even though she wanted to offshore more jobs. So the unions are corrupt. Collective bargaining, though, is really the only tool you have as employees of a big corporation against multi-billion dollar corporations. Collective bargaining should always be used, and there should be some framework for allow workers to either unionize, either through micro unions or going with the big unions. The benefit of the big unions is they have lawyers. All right, digressed. TJ Media is reporting, and we talked about this last night with Perry, on the way out the door, Biden regime authorized $50 million for condoms in Gaza. A lot of people found this super weird. I didn't, because it's wasteful spending, but what are they doing here? They are preventing Palestinians from procreating with $50 million. Now, it turns out to be like 500 million condoms. They're not that many people. That's like 1,000 condoms per Palestinian man in Gaza. So it's ridiculous. What this is birth control. And that's what all the elite want to do. So it doesn't matter where you're lowering sperm counts in the United States or giving condoms to Palestinians. You know, it doesn't matter. Anything creating transgender monsters, you know, that can't reproduce. All these are modes of birth control. Obviously, condoms is prima facie, but that's the reason. I mean, and obviously, like buying $300 screws, instead of paying 10 cents for a condom, the federal government will pay whatever, $1 or $2 or $10 per condom. You know, a lot of that money is siphoned off either by the grift, or actually the money is sent to the Middle East, and there, when it's, you know, sure, you buy a bunch of condoms, but you're also buying weapons or what have you. If you didn't hear, this is the One America News. Sean Duffy confirmed by Senate to lead Department of Transportation. He's going to be replacing, or he's taking the seat that Pete Buttigieg took. I imagine he can only do better than Pete Buttigieg. I mean, Sean Duffy was a Fox News host. What expertise he has in engineering or transportation, I don't know. And like I said, I don't really care. It's apparent what Trump was doing, hiring folks from the media sphere for the reason of creating good spokespeople for his policies. Whether it's Pete Hegseth or Sean Duffy or RFK Jr., which I think he's going to have a little more latitude probably than any other department head. Tulsi Gabbard. These people are going to be, you know, Kristi Noem, these people are going to be good spokespeople for Trump's policies that they'll need to implement, obviously. So let's not get all hung up on whether somebody could do the job. It's an executive position. And what do executives do? They delegate. So all these people, all these cabinet heads are all going to have teams of people to do the actual work. Speaking of nominees, one of the most important is Tulsi Gabbard. The Spectator, Tulsi Gabbard will bring sunlight to a rotten system. I mean, this is written by Meghan McCain, who I don't care for her. I never really cared for her father either. But that's not the point. Tulsi Gabbard would be a great head of intelligence. Why? If you've ever heard her speak, she talks about policy. It's all about, and much like Trump, all about how the American citizen is treated or benefits by said policies. She's going to be head of DNI. I imagine she's not going to allow spying on Americans. That's what we're hoping. We're hoping to unwind the surveillance rights that were put forth in the first Patriot Act, second Patriot Act, etc. And Real Clear Politics has the headline, "Stop the Nonsense and Confirm Tulsi Gabbard," in this opinion piece by Charlie Kirk. I'm not a big fan of Charlie Kirk. I like what he's doing. TPUSA, I think it is a great organization and did well under his tutelage. So I don't have anything really against Charlie Kirk. He's just, you know. I like people whose viewpoints are tempered. You know, that's the most important thing, because then you can start getting fanatical. I understand you like whatever, the Eagles. But my favorite team is X, you know, and then the person goes berserk. It's like you should always temper your point of view as not to become fanatic or extremist. The article says, though, in the long term, though, securing the president's promises can't be done with executive orders alone. Success, and this is the key part here, will come down to the president picking appointees who can carry out his will. And that's what I was just talking about. Them being the face of the department, being able to hold press conferences and to explain Trump's policies. And then, of course, under them, they're going to have a team of people actually carrying it out. And they're going to be responsible to do so, to make sure that those things were carried out to the letter. Also, Charlie Kirk goes on to say, Trump has faced not just opposition, but outright sabotage and deceit from the so-called intelligence community. They spied on his campaign and gave life to a ridiculous smear that he was a Russian agent. Analysts deliberately withheld information from the president, then leaked about what they were doing to the press. And of course, during the 2020 election, the intelligence apparatus pressured America's tech companies to engage in widespread censorship, while a network of former intelligence officials lied through their teeth to denounce the Hunter Biden laptop as Russian disinformation. On to RFK. NBC News is reporting RFK Jr. to face grilling from senators at his first confirmation hearing. Kennedy was clear an expansive array of hurdles as he seeks to be confirmed as Health and Human Services Secretary, one of the most powerful posts in government. The HHS, I think, next to the Secretary of Defense, has the most employees under him. And so, well, it's actually Homeland Security also up there. The important thing is, and I'm going to keep reiterating this, the Reformation needs Tulsi Gabbard because we need intelligence agency reformation. We need FDA particularly, but the health industry reformation, because we need to talk truthfully about health, human biology, etc. And of course, most particularly the Federal Secret Police, or the FBI, needs serious reform. So all the people need to be, I think, even more than Pete Hegseth. So look for the resistance from the establishment, left and right, is going to be against RFK Jr., which you'll see today, and tomorrow with Tulsi Gabbard. And I think Kash Patel and Tulsi the same day. So I think Kash Patel might get through, but I think Tulsi won't. I think she should be appointed otherwise through recess. But I don't know if you could do recess appointment if you fail a vote. Anyway. The American Thinker has the headline, GOP senators shouldn't fall for Pence's subterfuge against RFK Jr. And you have to be able, it's like people have to pass the sniff test. People are either on board with reformation or they're not. They're protecting the status quo. Now, people on the left, liberals, for years were talking about, oh, the status quo, those are rich people, just want to keep things as they are. People have to, now, Mike Pence certainly did not pass the sniff test. He was a traditional establishment conservative that's more worried about abortion than he is about fiscal policy or particularly the rights of the American citizen. The Federalist is reporting RFK Jr. can shore up support and save women with his common sense stance on abortion pills. I'll just look at the quote here from the Federalist. The removal of the Food and Drug Administration safety measures on the pill during the COVID lockdowns, and this is key, including in-person visits and follow-up care requirement, has created significant risks for women. As you saw, that one woman who was denied abortion and got the abortion pill ended up dying from complications from the pill. Pro-life groups are urging the reinstatement of critical safety measures. RFK Jr. has the opportunity to answer the question responsibly and wisely, taking common sense approach to protect women's health. So the abortion pill is risky to women's health, and that's the point. And pro-life can take that stance and talk about that. Now, people have to understand, and people on the left would never, but what we have to understand is that the reason Roe versus Wade was disabled, was ruled against, was because of the abortion pill. So Roe versus Wade was always a terrible decision. You could look at any scholars on the left and the right, and they would say it didn't really hold water. And if you know anything about Jane Doe and the one person who testified in that trial, there were inconsistencies with her, what she testified to. In any case, the reason everyone got around Roe versus Wade was, despite what people say, oh, it's conservative bench and Trump did this, and perhaps all that, maybe even, wittingly was all done with people participating for their cause or what have you. But the point is the reason it was removed is because of the abortion pill. Abortion pills, certainly now, but it's easier to have a woman take a pill and get an abortion than to get the woman in a clinic to go by a line of pro-life protesters. They could just get the pill in the mail and take it, and that's one dead baby. The abortion pill was severely restricted before COVID, but then particularly the restrictions were removed under the Biden administration after Roe versus Wade was repealed. And it was repealed so that could happen. There are more abortions taking place now than ever before. The majority of increase is with the abortion pill. All right. More news from One American News. Homeland Security Secretary Kristi Noem takes part in New York City immigration enforcement operations. If you didn't see this, this is news from yesterday. It was actually the night before yesterday, where she went on ICE raids, which is good to see. Joy Reid called it performance art, but really what it is the head of a department getting on the street and seeing what it's like. Even if it was just for an hour or a photo op for half an hour, whatever it was, good for her. We didn't see Mayorkas out there with the guys with the vests and the automatic weapons. So I like her. I like Kristi Noem. Sorry. I like dogs too. But we're not talking about dogs. We're talking about policy. Okay. Just because someone did something bad might be bad judgment. But as long as they're fulfilling the policy objectives. All right. Thomas Massey, if you don't know who he is, and Mike Lee advocate for U.S. to dump NATO. Lee posed a question about whether people would like to leave NATO. So Thomas Massey, I believe, congressperson from Kentucky. Mike Lee is a senator from Utah. And they advocate for leaving NATO. Unless NATO reforms its mission, I think we should withdraw from NATO. Absolutely. I mean, Thomas Massey is more of a libertarian, so our views mesh, but I mean, come on. You see what people have to read about Operation Gladio, and then they'll kind of figure out what NATO is all about. You know, NATO has been really used by the Club of Bern to achieve foreign diplomacy objectives. And we shouldn't be contributing to a military force that's basically run by the CIA and MI6 and the AFD, or I'm sorry. What is the German secret police? The BFD? Federalist is reporting CBS claims southern states are too poor, incompetent, and to handle disaster recovery without the Fed. So if you didn't see this, this was part of the interview with Maggie Brennan and JD Vance on Face the Nation on Sunday. And Maggie told JD Vance, who was offering to get rid of FEMA and just dole out the money to the states, she said southern states are too poor, incompetent to handle disaster recovery without the feds. That's insulting. And if I were Mississippi, or some of the states she named, Alabama, I would have wrote a note to CBS. While interviewing Vice President J.D. Vance, CBS moderator Margaret Brennan suggested southern states are too incompetent and poor to recover from national disasters without federal help from FEMA. You know, FEMA has specialized expertise, she said. Some of these states just don't have their arsenal. How will states who are lower income states, the Mississippis, the Kentuckys, the Alabamas, be able to do this for themselves without federal help? Well, first of all, the money would still come from the federal government. So the poorer ones, but she equated poor to stupid. So that was particularly insulting for J.D. Vance, who came from an impoverished childhood to become the vice president of the United States, because he also came from Appalachia. To say if you come from a poor area that somehow you're not smart. Very insulting. The Federalist also reports New York Magazine crops out truth with young conservative hit piece. They had an agenda, and that was to slander the MAGA movement as some white supremacist cult. So New York Magazine, if you didn't see this on TV, it was on Gutfeld and the Five. So New York Magazine, which is a liberal rag, much like the Atlantic, had a cover picture of what looked like young debutantes, white privileged people in designer dress, looking up at a Jumbotron with their champagne and whatever, celebrating during one of Trump's inaugural balls. What's interesting is this particular inaugural ball was held by a black man. And if you looked at the larger picture, they were black men in the original horizontal photograph. And it showed outside the crop lines, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 black guys. And so they just cropped into the young white folks and tried to create the narrative that it's a bunch of young, rich debutantes. That's the young people that like Trump. The Federalist is also reporting why Congress needs to swiftly pass concealed carry reciprocity. If you don't know what this is if you get a concealed carry license or you're permitted to conceal carry in your state, that ruling should allow you to carry concealed in all other states. So I've talked about this before, and it's important to have, obviously, especially if you're in danger. So if you cross state lines and someone's trying to kill you, that at least you could remain armed. But what I said is every state should be licensed in every state is the issue. And I think it is in most states. You need to have a license to conceal carry. That licensing usually has congruent requirements. So if you pass the test in one state, you should be able to conceal carry in another. Congress faces a crucial opportunity to reaffirm a cornerstone of our constitutional freedoms, the Federalist says, and that is the right to bear arms. National concealed carry reciprocity legislation would ensure that state borders do not restrict or invalidate the fundamental right of bearing arms. At its heart, this is about acknowledging the constitutional rights that are universal, not dependent on geography. The Constitution does not stop at state lines. And this is the most cogent point, that the Constitution, however the state government interprets it, really doesn't matter, but the Constitution reigns supreme. So Bill of Rights is the law of the land, as people should know. So that's important to know, I think. But I still believe in federalism. All right, in another opinion piece, this is from the Wall Street Journal, Why Climate Change Ideology is Dying. This is by Barton Swaim. Voters have concluded that the private jet flying alarmists don't really believe their own claims. It's one of the major points why people are ditching it is the false claims, obviously, by Al Gore and others. And of course, the elite that say, you don't get energy, but I can have as much as I want. But also the science isn't bearing out. And and of course, the hypocrisy with other nation states. China gets to pollute, but we don't. It's used as a weapon. And people don't understand that. Everybody wants a clean environment, but we're polluting the environment even more and more seriously. And then we go around saying, you can't have a combustion engine. Fox News is reporting AI startup DeepSeek facing hacks, but the AI startup is also blocking questions about the Chinese Communist Party. DeepSeek says its services being disrupted by a large-scale malicious cyber attack. That might very well be, because apparently nobody knew about DeepSeek. And it kind of came out of nowhere. We had no intelligence on it, which is why our intelligence is failing. But it doesn't surprise me that once it's become apparent that it exists, that the Western, and don't forget, this is what bothers me about people. Don't forget that the government is not the only one that employs hackers. Corporations do it. So this could very well be an army of hackers by Sam Altman or Bill Gates. You don't think Bill Gates has warehouses somewhere in Romania filled with hackers? And of course, it could be the U.S. government. And I wouldn't doubt that Trump ordered a hack attack against DeepSeek or its parent company. ABC News, the Fed is expected to hold interest rates steady, defying pressure from Trump. Trump said last week he would demand lower interest rates. This is understandable because the Fed isn't independent. And Trump also has to understand he's got to turn growth on first. If he turns growth on in other ways, the Fed will follow. But I don't think the Fed, because we don't know if the economy is going to improve. We suspect. So until they see an uptick in the GDP, we probably won't see anything from the Fed. Wall Street Journal is reporting American kids are getting even worse at reading. New national test scores show a continuing slide in reading skills. Duh. That's why I try to do here, every weekday is try to read the news. It's really important to read. And I was talking about the first book that I ever read. I read it in like 6 hours. And this was when I was a preteen. It was like 11, 12. First time I read a whole book, I read it in 6 hours. And then I loved reading after that. Once I figured out I could do it. And then, of course, I'd have to find stuff, different books that I like to read. In any case, reading is fundamental. You'll never learn the truth without reading. You could hear it from other people, but you'll never know it unless you read it yourself. I know I harp on that all the time. It's really important. Importante. CNN's Jim Acosta rips Trump in defiant on-air announcement. He's leaving. No time to bow down to a tyrant. And this is from Mediaite. So this guy, Tommy Christopher with Mediaite, reports Jim Acosta being defiant. If he was either wittingly or unwittingly an agent of the intelligence agencies. I don't know if he was. He seems that stupid that he thought he was, or he was led to believe that he was, and he thinks, is a great air of arrogance and self-importance. But he never reported anything correctly. Never. And so what makes you think you're a good anchor, that you have any worth? At least, what's his face there? Cuomo. When Fredo left, or he got fired from MSNBC, he went to News Nation and he tried to turn it around, at least try to report the truth. And the thing is, the truth is something your adversary has to report. So if your reporting and somebody else's reporting doesn't match up, somebody's wrong. And it turned out it was the left constantly. All right, going on a little too much there. The post-millennial, if you didn't hear about this story, there is an Arizona high school teacher caught on camera misleading class about biological reality. So this guy, Les Beard, physics teacher at Monera High School in Tucson, has been accused of misleading minors about teaching the class that some women can have XY chromosomes. Well, we all know they can't. And so I guess one of his students recorded him, probably a conservative student. Right. It's biological reality. You could pretend all you want on your time. And this goes to Joy Reid also. Joy, that you got to report the truth. You got to report reality. You call, you call conservatives all the things in the book. Take a look at your folks. Including Dalton dictator Tiffany Henyard jumps into chaotic brawl with angry activists, her boyfriend, after she's called a bitch during a tense board meeting. I'm not going to go into this whole story because it's not local for most people. So anyway, Dalton is like a township in New York, and she is a POC. I guess they don't even have mayors. It's so small. But she's considered mayor for all intents and purpose. And so she has, like we've seen recently a lot, she seems to be using her position for personal gain instead of serving the people. And so there was money missing that was supposed to go to an outreach department that disappeared, and everybody is blaming her. And she is retaliating against the community by not issuing licenses. I think a liquor license for St. Patrick's 3-story restaurant. She was found in contempt for allegedly stonewalling a liquor license. Yeah, so she's not well liked there. So have a recall. But her and her boyfriend actually got into a fist fight with some of her constituency. I just had to put that in there. Thanks for joining me today. Don't forget to engage with the channel, like, subscribe, leave a comment, share the podcast. Remember, you're under attack, psychologically and biologically. Check out my other website, libpop.org. Learn about libertarian populism. Check me out on social media. Xgetter, Minds, Truth Social, Substack, Instagram, Facebook. Stay hip to the trick. And check out episode 104 of Tuesdays with Perry. It's posted last night. Perry and I go live every Tuesday at 9 p.m., 9-ish. It's more like 9:15. So join us then. I'll see you tomorrow. Respect.
I don't really care, Margaret. I don't want that person in my country, and I think most Americans agree with me.
I'm Donald Trump, and I approve this message.
I'm an American. I have rights. Google me, bitch! Google me!